Hello.
Hi. As you look in your email, there should be the invitation.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, so do that and see what happens. Andrew into the waiting room. Admit. Okay. Boom. Let's see. There we have your face and my face. Okay, so it says it's recording it all by automatically. Now it may run out at 12. Yeah, I had to set it for some reason for 11:30, or it wasn't 11. I don't know. Anyway, if it runs out, we'll start again. Okay, so see me?
I do. What a wonderful background you have. I think
Yeah,
I recognize that
I
mountain.
don't know what it is. I got it out of my pictures. I think it's actually
Your
now
backyard, Dad.
is what we see from what?
It's your backyard.
It's the back, yeah, it's the front yard. It's the yeah, it is. I didn't notice that till just now. I didn't realize that till just now. What it is.
Yeah, it's nice, man.
As if I'm sitting in Unicoi, right? Yeah, that's very nice. I like it. It's a good picture. I would like to get a video going, so there'd be movement. My friend has one where there's a palm tree over on the right-hand side here, and then there's these waves coming in.
Right.
But I haven't figured out how to get a video.
I'm sure you'll be able to get it. I'm sure it's not that crazy. What are you gonna put? Aliens?
Well, I just had a long conversation with John Broadus, who believes in UFOs and believes
John Broadus.
John Broadus is Jane, and John. Remember Jane?
Oh, okay. Jane's husband. Yeah. I remember the pilot.
So every few, years I call him, or every few months, or once a year maybe, I call him and we have this long conversation, and he tells me all this shit. Part of which yesterday was all about how UFOs are really real, and they're really what high-level people think is that they're people from the future, human beings from the future who are coming back to warn us. That's the current theory, which of course is a plot of a number of TV fiction shows. However, anyway, so let's talk about anything you want and then get to my book at some point.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, let's talk about your book. I mean, that's
Okay,
the whole,
good. Let's do that.
purpose. I did read the book. It's been at this point like a month and a half since
Right.
I read it over a weekend for my birthday, actually. I think so. Actually, I guess it's been almost 2 months. Whenever you sent it to me, we happened to be traveling or whatever, and I had some time, and so I just kind of plunged through it. It wasn't, it's not too long, so. I thought it was a really interesting book, and obviously I was familiar with some of what was going on there because we've talked about meditation, consciousness, and stuff like that. So I was familiar with some of the concepts, but you hadn't really, I don't think, put it all together in the way that you have with this book, right? Which really seems like what you're doing in this case is you're taking all of this experience that you've had and the different learnings that you've done of reading all of these different kind of minds in consciousness, and you've kind of boiled it down and put what their different thoughts are together, and then added kind of your own spice in the middle, which is what people do. That's how you advance the the field, so to speak.
Right.
So, so yeah, no, it was very interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit like if I was gonna say kind of how the whole thing struck me. I think it's a roadmap, to understanding kind of how to become fully conscious or aware, or whatever kind of thing you want to use. But then also you have this component where you go into kind of more of the problem-solving mind. That's a little bit like physical therapy, I think, is the biggest thing that I could compare it to. I don't know if that's because I'm going through it right now. I know right now I know you've been through a lot of physical therapy, but it's sort of similar, you know, when you start talking about the way that the thoughts come up and identifying the thoughts and noticing the thoughts, and then these different little tricks that you can use for these specific ones.
Let me get this straight, Andrew. I'm hearing you say physical therapy. I would have thought psychotherapy, and I don't quite understand why are you saying physical.
No. So I'm comparing it to physical therapy. I think you could use psychotherapy. Certainly, what you're doing, you know, in this is mental, right? Not physical. But the reason I think that I'm comparing it to physical therapy is when you're going through like the stuff with the different tricks that you use with the problem solving mind. It's very much like, you know, okay, I'm going to take your shoulder and put it in this position, and then, you know, hold this muscle to isolate this thing and like stretch it in this way. You're sort of doing the same thing with the mind as you address like when you go into the examples of each type of thing that you're trying to sort of work through with the problem solving mind.
Yeah.
And you practice those different techniques. It's a similar sort of thing, I think.
Huh. And never occurred to me. So I'm going to have you explain that more to me at some point.
Yeah, I think for me, way more than psychotherapy, I don't think is similar at all, but maybe that's, I mean, my experience with psychotherapy, which is fairly extensive from an end user standpoint. Obviously, I was never a practitioner, but I've been to like a lot of therapy, and it was really, their approach was never sort of what we're talking about or what you're talking about in this book. It was never about consciousness. It was always about feelings. And how does that make you feel? And so kind of like identifying that, and I'm not really sure.
Okay, well, I'm willing to go with that, but what I don't understand is how it's like physical therapy. I mean, I have also taken physical therapy. You know,
yeah, no, extensively, I know.
You know, as one does. I'm trying to get the analogy going. So you gave me one analogy about the shoulder, which I'm not sure I completely got, even that one, but maybe you could get some more and it would make it clearer to me what you have in mind.
If I could go, that thought was an old one from when I first read the book. That was like my primary thought, because I went and I looked at like a couple of notes that I put in. Let me see if I can find your actual examples.
Oh, you have it there.
Fireworks, being here right away. No, where the
chapter before that, I think, the baby on the battlefield.
Yes.
Is section 2.
Right, replaying social interactions.
And let's see, I can tell you the table of contents. I mean,
no, I found it.
Okay.
So Jesus, this is a lot of reading to do right now.
Well, I can sort of summarize it. I mean, I can sort of tell you what's in it. I start out with a list of things that you shouldn't do, right? Mm-hmm. And then I say the things that you can do, and there are basically 3 main categories. One is well, more really, but one is adding thoughts to bothersome thoughts. One is what called staring. Carrie made up that term. And one is untangle and be free. And the longest one is untangle and be free.
Right.
It has many subcategories, of which one is the example about Trump, basically, the politician that you hate. And the other one is about the situation where I was turned down for some thing. And then part of that, I think it's part of that, I don't know where the hell, I guess this comes from another section, has to do with the fact that things I tell myself are bothersome. One of which has to do with rules that I made up that are bad rules, like I have to be loved by everybody. And the other one, which has to do with the language, the dark side of language. So those are the things that I remember. Was that helpful?
Yeah, I want to talk about the dark side of language later. But yeah, so, and as you've been talking, I kind of looked at one of these examples and read a little bit of it too while I was listening.
Right.
So like the replaying social interactions example. So
Right.
when I say it's like physical therapy, you know, again, maybe this is because I've been going through a physical therapy thing right now over the last like 3 months.
Right.
But for me, you know, when you talk about, you know, you start with this kind of entangled mess of you know, this social interaction that happened. And so you have to go through and you start using the different tools in your tool belt. So like in your example, you start with the divide and conquer trick, right? And then you kind of, you write everything down and you start splitting it out.
Right.
You know, that to me is like the physical therapist coming over and like messing with my shoulder and being like, okay, like, you know, they run a bunch of tests when I go to my physical therapy place. They run a bunch of tests and they're like, okay, what's going on today? Well, you can rotate it this way good, but you can't rotate it this way good. You know, that means that this crazy muscle is tight or whatever. And then as you proceed through, like you divide and conquer it, and then you go through and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to work on, you know, the past, present, and future. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you work on the past, and the way that you work on the past is you know, different, or sorry, before, during, and after. You know, the way that you work on the before, during, and after is it's all different depending on what's going on. And then
well, I get out different emotions. I separate them is what I do. And then I go through and find out what the emotions were that I was having. And I make lists of those. Right.
Right. And then you work on each of these emotions, right?
Yeah.
You kind of go through.
Right.
And you use, it looks like the mental talk.
Right. Mental talk, mental images, and mental bodily sensations.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, and then, you know, and then there's more here. I mean, there's like 4 more pages more. And I did read this, like the whole thing. Obviously right now, it's, you know, it's a little fuzzy because it's a couple months in the past. But basically to me, what it looks like, I mean, you could look at, there's a bunch of different analogies you could use, right? You could use a toolbox. You could say, this is a tool belt, right? For emotionally getting through life, or spiritually getting through life, whatever you want to use. That one's a good one too. You know, the one though that struck out to me was physical therapy of just kind of being in, and I think also because it's obvious you've spent like a great deal of time on this, and you're at least you're an expert, so to speak. And so our physical therapists, you know, they have to have a doctorate degree. And so my physical therapist, he's able to run a couple tests and be like, this is what's going on. And it seems like you're able to do that. Now, I don't know if you're able to do that with someone else, but it seems like you're certainly able to do it for yourself, which in a pursuit like this is kind of what you're doing. I mean, it's kind of by necessity, self-centric.
Yeah, I'm sort of saying this is what I can do. And implied in that is a suggestion that you could do it too. And here's how, sort of.
Yeah.
Trying to get so other people could do it as well.
Well, that's why I like the physical therapy analysis.
The physical therapy. I'll think about that further. Yeah.
One thing you said in here is there's 4 different kinds of minds. And I don't think I got all of them. So there's and this may be because I think when I read it, I probably did, but going back, I only had like 30 minutes before we got on the phone. The running mind, the fully conscious mind, the problem-solving mind, and did I get that right?
Sensory mind.
Sensory mind.
The sensory mind was the 4th kind, right? Sensory.
And what chapter is that covered
in? Let me see if I can find it here. I'm pretty sure that is in the section on the baby on the battlefield. Let me see that. So that's page, in mine, it's page 35.
35?
Well,
No,
that's where it
maybe-
starts. That's where it starts.
Maybe on the battlefield,
Um,
48,
You-
section 2.
yeah, the pages you've got are different from the way it came out in the book. So the pages in the book, yeah, it's going to be a problem unless you actually have the book, which presumably
Got
it's
it.
going.
Not yet. It's
You will.
coming. I ordered
Um,
several copies.
Let me see if I can find that. Two other contact in mind. Yeah. It's just before where it says by problem solving mind is talking here, things not to do. It's just before that. And basically what I say, it's not hopeless. So cut to the chase. Tell us what could be done about this problem of all this stuff coming into mind. And
One of the others is the
I have two
sensory
other
mind.
kinds of mind I can use. I started by talking about the fully conscious mind,
Mhm.
and then the daytime dreaming mind, and then the sensory mind, and the other is the problem solving mind. So that's four kinds of mind in all.
Got
So
it.
problem solving mind, yeah, is the fourth kind. And
When do
then,
you get into the sensory mind, though? I guess is my
well, yeah, it comes up very much later in this in the same section that we're talking about, in that's how you find out what the feelings are by the sensations in your body.
question.
So the sensations in your body, which is where you have sensations, are in other words, if you feel anger, you feel a knot in your stomach. Okay, that would be an example of the operation of sensory mind in this case. Now, that's mainly what I'm talking about here. Now, but I don't know. I do think that maybe I could have. I mean, there's other kinds of sensory mind, like, for example, vision, hearing, smell, taste, touch, right, and all the other senses.
That's all that stuff that you used to do when you were kind of first starting out, right? With the different modalities of, like, you could
That's what
out, or you could
right,
listen in.
Right. Shinzen Young's thing is very much a matter of sort of running through the different simple senses, right? That is basically see, hear, feel, where you have outside see, hearing, feel, and inside seeing, hearing, and feeling on the inside is bodily sensations of emotions, kind of. So yeah, that's the kind of sensory mind stuff that he focuses on. But here I'm mainly saying that the way you use your sensory mind is by getting the feeling of things inside, how things feel inside, and mostly that's of what we conventionally call emotions. But I've lately, if I can just go on to the next book, lately realized that there are other things that you have sensations. For example, the sensations associated with thought. So, for example, if I was to say something absurd, right, like, UFOs are, actually people from the future coming to warn us, and so on, you get a certain feeling in your head, right? There's a certain feeling in your head that's a cognitive feeling in your head.
Well, wait a minute. Do you get a certain feeling in your head?
Well, don't you?
Somebody else's feeling, like John's feeling, is probably very different.
Oh yeah, it's going to be different. Or if I were to say to you, there's actually a planet behind the sun which is being hidden from us by NASA. Okay, right. Now that creates a certain sensation in your. I could say it's in your head. It's really in your nervous system that you get a certain sensation when I say certain things. So there are sensations.
You mean wait? Because you say a certain sensation.
Yeah.
We're talking about a certain sensation when someone says something ridiculous.
That would
not
be
necessarily to a certain thing, because that may be
an example.
That may make perfect sense to some fucking crazy. I guarantee you, there's a YouTube video about that.
Oh wow! Oh yeah.
Believe it.
Oh, yeah.
And when you say that to them, they're like, yeah, and they get a different.
They get a different sensation, but it's still a sensation. It's still a sensation, right?
Well, there's a sensation to everything that you hear.
Well, any different kinds of thought are going to produce different sensations. So
right.
So
okay.
you know, and
I'm
that's
tracking. So it's more about like
right.
the kind of thought that's coming in, or the kind of thing that's being said that you're reacting to. You have a reaction, and that could be, gosh, I think this person is crazy, or yes, I think, I really like what this person has to say,
Or
or
even
whatever.
when you have the thought by yourself. I mean, for example, suppose you have a thought about, choosing between two different products, let's say in the store, right? What you do is you look at one of them and you get a certain sensation in your thought machine, right? And when you look at the other product, you get a different sensation, and you're choosing on the basis of those sensations of thought. I'm saying those are kind of similar to sensations of emotion. Just as if you feel anger, you have one sort of sensation, a knot in your stomach. When you feel, excitement, you have another sensation. Similarly, thought has sensations associated with it. And there are sensations of which you can be aware, conscious, it can come into consciousness, but that don't normally come into consciousness. That is, people normally think without noticing the sensations associated with those thoughts. They just think of the sort of propositional content of the thought rather than the sensation it gives to them. So I'm thinking
They experience it, but they're not conscious of it.
They experience it, but they're not conscious of it. Right. But you can be conscious of it if you, and the way I could, demonstrate that is by making various statements or, reminding people of various things. Like, for example, there are aesthetic sensations when you look at a particular, when you go outside and look at the stars up above, right? You get the sensation of awe, right? And that's a definite bodily, physical, unquestionably real sensation that you get. Besides the idea of, the infinite universe going out there, you get that, but you also get a feeling, I'll call it a sensation of, if I list out, well, anyway, this is going beyond what's in the book. So this is
no, it's a really interesting conversation. I think the awe is an easily identifiable example, but I think for me, the more intriguing part of those sensations, if you want to call them that, I think I've identified that in my personal experience as the sensation is like the meaning that I assign to things, if that makes sense. Like, so something will happen to me in life, right?
Right.
Say, and for like, say, somebody says something to me, right?
Right.
And the meaning, the sensation that I will then feel, usually 80% of the time, for me, probably 95% of the time, I feel like some sort of negative sensation. Like I assign, and it's not, I've learned as I've gotten older that I'm the one doing that. It's my perception that's assigning this negative connotation to
anything anybody says. Always
thinking,
negative? Is it sometimes positive? I mean,
it's
why do you
sometimes
say it's
positive.
negative?
It's sometimes positive, but it's I'm heavily, when you say 80%, it sounds like everybody's heavily. I kind of feel like maybe I'm a little more than average.
Yeah.
But maybe not. In any case, this happens all the time. I assign a meaning to something. And when I say meaning, it's that sensation that I'm feeling from whatever it is that happened.
Well, it may also have words
outside of the reality. Huh?
So the negative is kind of a non-symbolic feeling. In other words, it's not words, it's a feeling so this is two realms. There's the non-symbolic level of being, and then of existing, and then there's on top of that there's the symbols, when you say that's wrong, or I don't believe you, or I have a negative evaluation, would be sort of a symbolic thing, but the feeling is non-symbolic, you might say, something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's mixed for me,
Right.
Sometimes have both, sometimes I have one. I don't know that I ever have the words without the non-symbolic.
I would think so, yeah.
The base level is always the symbolic, and then sometimes the words are
the non-symbolic. The base level is the non-symbolic.
I'm sorry, yes, the non-symbolic.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I've been reading about that actually this morning, and this guy Bronkhorst, who has this who was pushing this idea of, the non-symbolic, there's these two realms, the non-symbolic. And the question is, can people get to the non-symbolic, get sort of back down to the non-symbolic level? And
Only or something?
what?
Get back down to the non-symbolic level only, or what do you mean?
Yeah, the non-symbolic level only, right? Do you
Not
have
have the words at all.
non-symbolic level, right?
For the symbol.
And I think it's got to be true. It's got to be true. Although apparently there's some people he cites who don't believe it, but yeah, it's got to be true. And that level does seem to have a higher level of, in a sense, reality, or it's a different realm of reality, kind of. In other words, if you're at the non-symbolic level, that feels mystical, kind of. Whereas, and some people don't get down to it. Some people are living completely on the symbolic level and don't really even realize
They're not conscious of, yeah.
and they can't get to it.
I
They don't
believe
wanna
that.
get to it. And the 7 things that I gave, to return to the book, the 7 techniques that I gave are intended to get you to the non-symbolic level quickly and easily, right? And it does that by turning off the symbols, basically, is what it does. Turns off, I say it turns off the discursive mind. The discursive mind being that part that is doing the symbolizing. So that if you can do, one of those, you gets you to the non-symbolic level, which is kind of valuable.
What part are we talking about here? The seven things that you said?
In section 1, there are 7 adventures in high consciousness.
Got it. Yeah.
The first one is Hubert Benoit, and then there's Hayes.
Right, they're the different people, and then it goes into you, and yeah.
And there's me at the end, right? And those are all ways of getting to the non-symbolic level. Would be another way of putting it. I didn't use that language because I hadn't read this Broncos guy, but that would be another way of putting it. I talk about it as turning off the discursive mind, but
there's a bunch of different names of which you list.
A bunch of different names, right?
Yeah. It's the coming away awareness,
right?
All of that.
And the question is, why is that valuable? That's sort of what I'm kind of struggling with now. Is saying to myself now, okay, so why should people want to do this?
Well, I mean, I think what I think what you put forth in this book is very kind of it's a cogent argument for that in the sense of this whole physical therapy, because you don't like that. But if you want to use like mental therapy way, right? Like it's valuable because you're able to pause the kind of the runaway train sort of mind.
Right.
And you're able to then kind of peel things out and start thinking, okay, well, what am I thinking? And do I want to experience these thoughts? I think one thing that isn't really covered in this book, but is covered in other literature that I've read, like the 4 Agreements, is,
Who's that?
4 Agreements?
4 Agreements?
Don Miguel Ruiz. Oh, you never read that?
What is it called? 4 Agreements by who?
Don Miguel Ruiz.
Don Miguel Ruiz, Ruiz.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think one thing that's not covered is how much of what you think is from shit that happened in your past.
Right.
That impacts you in ways that people, if you haven't done work on it and you're not conscious of it and you haven't thought it through kind of in a similar way to this, you're not going to have any idea. And it's just, you cover how, it's kind of completely out of your control, you know what I mean? Like what you're thinking.
Right.
But there's a piece of it too that like ties to your past. And it's something that book addresses very well. And it gives you a system to kind of work through it in a sort of a similar way to what you're doing, but without the sort of, well, it's a different take. It's a different take. It's not really the same thing that you guys are talking about, but it's very well. It occurs to me this book of why you would want to do that. I think because you're kind of showing people how to work through it.
Well, that's in that one chapter, which is section 2, right? I intended, my idea was that I would start out by showing you all these different ways of turning off the discursive mind, pausing the discursive mind. And then I would take into account the fact that whenever you do that, you always go back to some sort of ravings, about things that happened in the past or the future, or different kinds of mental conversations and so on. And that's section 2, which is the baby in the battle on the battlefield. But really, what I think I'm doing here that's sort of new in my experience is to say, there is this state, the non-symbolic mind, let's say, or whatever you want to call it, full consciousness and so on, but it always goes away. And the teachers that I've seen, it goes away and is replaced without you knowing it, without you being aware of it, is sort of automatically replaced with these imaginary conversations kind of thing, imaginary emotional movies kind of thing, which is what the second chapter is about. And the teachers that I've had don't really take that part seriously, which is why I said I need to take that seriously, because it actually happens. And not only does it actually happen sometimes, it always happens. And it is a big item, Now, I did talk about it here as if it was a thing to be, if there was things that came into your mind that were uncomfortable, right, and persistent, those are the ones that you might want to do something about along the lines that I described. But, I've rethought that kind of.
Well, no, it's good. That's the physical therapy part. You have something that's bothering you, like why wouldn't you want to work on it? And for me, that's the whole case for the book, right? Like without that, it's just a summary book of some other shit that you read from all these other teachers, which is fine if that's what you wanted to do. But it seems like, that's literally the whole point of this book, and the case that it's making for why you would want to get into the consciousness is so that you can notice when you're not in the consciousness, when you do get this runaway mind, and then work on the things that are coming up in the runaway mind, because that's where you spend most of your time.
That's true. That's true. And but I think when I was writing and thinking about it, I was thinking about those things that come up in your mind as being, in general, things to be dispensed with if possible.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking of the things that come up in the mind. Let me just tell you my present idea of this idea about the things that come up in the mind. They're unfinished situations. That is, there are situations in your life in which you haven't completed them. So there's different kinds. There's some kinds that are physiological, so you have to be fed, and drink and so on, sleep and that sort of thing. There's some things that have to do with safety and security. I'm doing Maslow's, hierarchy thing here.
Mm-hmm.
Safety and security is the next level. And then the next level, it has to do with love and belongingness. And if you've got a threat to your love and belongingness, like, if somebody calls you a walrus, for example, and you feel like that means that they hate you and have always been, thinking of you as a fat, ugly, bald, mustached blob of stupidity, which happened to me, that will kind of grab you, right?
Right.
And then above that is the level of esteem, getting the esteem of others, basically. And then above that is self-actualization. And what you do is you're trying to, the way I'm thinking of it now is that there are unfinished situations in all those areas, right? And those are the things that come into your mind, is the unfinished situations in all those areas. So I looked, hold on, let me get a thing here.
Oh, Jesus, Dad. Oh my God, dude. Well, it's gonna get demonetized from YouTube.
I beg your pardon. What's your problem?
Oh, you put some pants on. Good,
Put
good.
some pants on, yes.
Good, yeah. We could see walking away. Quite the view.
So, Jesus, I'm so fat, so horrible. I hate it.
Oh,
And I don't know how
well,
I'm
me too.
but I think about, I'm officially obese. at this point, given my body mass index. And I'm thinking after this hormone thing wears off in January, when I come out to see you, maybe I'll be able to go on a quest to lose weight, because that's what's missing with the testosterone is the quest aspect of things. I can't do video games, for example. I can't do them. Anyway, that's
what do video games have to do?
Well, what happened when I started this hormone treatment, which was 2 years ago, was that I completely stopped being able to engage in the video games. And what happened was I lost kind of the quest, the index of pursuing quests, right? Which is the video games, you
lost your motivation.
I lost that motivation to pursue a quest. And I think it has to do with testosterone. I think that's why, women don't do much video games of the quest sort. They don't have the testosterone. And I don't have the
percentage-wise, maybe, but you can't really say that. Women do.
I know they do for different, probably for social reasons, I would think.
But you don't need questing to lose weight. Like, you just need a little bit of discipline, and you got to do a little bit every day.
That's what I'm saying.
You can do that now. Now you can delude yourself and say that you can't and fold it and be like, I'll deal with it 2 months from now. Yeah. But that is the attitude of someone that is not going to make any progress. And probably, experience tells me when I do that and I just push it off,
right,
that means when the date comes, I'm not going to do anything different.
Right.
The only way that I'm going to do something different is if I act my way into it.
Right.
You have a look on your face. You're obviously tired of hearing this.
Well, no, I'm not, but you have testosterone and I don't. And it's different. Let me tell you, I had no idea how much a difference testosterone makes in my mental state. But anyway, that's a side issue. So what we were talking about was having these thoughts.
Well, I care about you. And I don't want you to be obese, and I don't want you to have health complications. So I'm just going to say, I don't know what it's like to not have testosterone, but I do know that you could walk for 30 minutes and eat a little bit less.
No, I do exercise.
Start it now.
The problem is eating a little bit less. That's the problem. Is that I'm out of control. It's out of control, especially at night, especially in the evening. It's out of control. Now, maybe I can bring it under control, but what I'm doing at this point is I'm saying I have to wait until January. That's basically what I'm saying. That's just the way it seems to be, but I could be wrong.
Maybe there's some sort of mental, that's interesting, because that sounds like that's all mental, right? At this point.
Yeah, it's all mental, and it's hormonal at this point, I think.
Hormonal.
But then when I come out to California, I can get a lap band. See, that's another thing I could do.
So what the fuck?
I'm desperate.
No, Dad.
I'm desperate.
Really? You're desperate to do anything but stop eating. And you want to get a surgery where they fucking put a band around your stomach? I don't even think they do that anymore, Dad.
No, they do. Oh, they do.
Well, all the billboards, I don't see them anymore.
No. I noticed that. Their billboards are all lawyers now.
Yeah. Here's your COVID claim. Fired illegally because of COVID? Call me. All right. We can talk more about consciousness, but okay. I want you to be healthy and happy.
Right. Well, what I was saying was that my feeling now is that, the dealing with these unfinished situations is just as important a part of life as the consciousness business, right? And
right.
Yeah, and I'm trying to integrate that, into a life that has several parts. One is doing the consciousness of consciousness thing, the full consciousness thing. Another one is the flow experiences. And flow experiences are characterized by not being conscious of consciousness. When you look at the descriptions of flow, which are, things that you're good at, right? You don't have the consciousness of consciousness. It's all your conscious mind is used up is in the task itself.
Yeah, which is like a whole nother state of mind. I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, talk about that.
I didn't notice that it was there. And it's something, you talked about it. And I would even say it can also be, I would associate it not just with things that you're good at, but things that require like an enormous amount of focus. So I would even say like your experience of like almost falling through the rafters and then not is a flow state, right? All of your focus went into, you hear about similar things, or I've heard about similar things when people talk about base jumping, right? You know what that is?
Yeah, right.
Right. So they talk about taking the threads, being on some fucking, radio tower, 400 feet up or whatever, and taking the different threads and loading them up and making sure that they're in the right order. And then the way that they're folding the fabric and getting it, and they're not thinking everything else is gone. Nothing in their life is there. All they're focusing on is getting the shit right for the prep for their jump, so that when they jump, everything, they don't die.
They don't die, right.
And I have a similar thing, not with base jumping and not with the danger aspect really, but with jujitsu.
Right.
Where everything disappears. Like when I spar with someone,
right,
and I'm fighting them, everything goes away. And there's a sense of like, it's timeless, it's effortless, right? It doesn't have the component of awareness of the fully conscious mind where like I have to force my way sort of into it. You know what I mean? I have to expend this mental, I don't know. It's just there.
Right.
And I can be there for an hour.
Right.
And when I come out of it, I'm completely refreshed, which is very different from sort of the consciousness, the fully conscious thing, right? If I'm in that for, trying to force it for 5 minutes, right? I'm probably only in it for 2.5 minutes because I keep coming awake again. And I'm a little bit exhausted.
Right. Well, you've looked up flow in Wikipedia, right? And the list of functions, the list of, well, I would advise you to do that. It's not, I didn't put it in the book, or I did put it in the book, actually. It appears, oh God, I'm not, the pages are going to be wrong, but there's a list, let's see, flow. I'm looking in the reference list here. Anyway, you can find it. It's a reference to the Wikipedia article.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia article. I don't know.
Yeah. So if you go down that, you'll see a list of things, 9 things, 6 things, and starting with complete loss of self-awareness, right? Are you getting the Wikipedia article? There's a list.
Merging of awareness and awareness.
Yeah.
Loss of reflective self-consciousness.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
That's the list. And that's if all those are present, right? Then you're in a flow. So I get it, for example, snowboarding, right? Now with snowboarding, it's a little bit different because from jujitsu, it's going to be different from jujitsu because in snowboarding, what happens is I'm completely absorbed in it while I'm doing it. Then I stop.
Right.
At that point, I can get an intermittent hit of consciousness, full consciousness of it, right? So that's what happens. I stop. Sometimes I'll like sit down, or something in the woods, right? And this flow, this sudden hit of full consciousness comes in, and I say, here I am. Here is existence, being, and I get one of those sort of unity consciousness things. Now, I guess in jujitsu, you don't get these pauses. Is the problem?
No, actually, you do.
Do you?
You do, and that's what I'm thinking about. So maybe I'll have to try doing that during the pauses. Yeah, you usually get like a 45-second or a minute break in between rounds. But I think for me, I'm normally focusing on other stuff that's not really covered a great deal in here. You talk about a little bit about breath work, which is something I've gotten a little bit more into as of late.
Oh, yeah.
Which is also a really interesting component.
I read that book, Breath.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. By Hickson Gracie?
Yeah, it's really crazy
Oh,
stuff.
wow. Yeah. He's really good, isn't he?
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah. I like.
But then when you get to the end, he basically says, you breathe in for 5.5 seconds, you breathe out for 5.5 seconds through your nose, and that's it. I mean, when you get to the last chapters where he's it doesn't come to as much as the anecdotes do, but still, it's interesting. And I do find that the thing that I put
Well,
in
he's
about
not
getting to
really.
yeah, go ahead. You go.
I'm sorry, there was lag. I didn't realize.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to say, well, I think he's definitely somebody in the jujitsu community that's very. Oh shit, there's bad lag, huh? Hello?
Hello?
Say something when you can see me wave my hands.
Something when I can see you wave your hands. I see you wave your hands. Are you hearing that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, I hear you.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So Hickson's good. I mean, he's definitely got an interesting perspective, but he's not I wouldn't say super diverse in his breath work. There's other people like Lard Hamilton.
Yeah.
And obviously Wim Hof.
Yeah, he talks about him. What does Lard Hamilton do?
So Lard Hamilton is a very sort of interesting guy. He's a big wave surfer. And he, obviously breath is a big part of that sport. Being able to hold your breath for a long time, you do a 50-foot wave, like you have to do pretty much superhuman things with your breath to be able to do that. And so he's gotten very into breath work and like doing exercises underwater with different breath modalities. And so he has this app called XPT where they have, and I think he's got some books out there too, where they do the different breath modalities. Because to me, that's always been a much more different. It's like, yes, I can do consciousness breath work. I can turn on my parasympathetic nervous system with my breath, right? But how can I turn on my sympathetic nervous system? And how can I maximize myself for action, right? And we've known for a long time that you can do it, right? Tennis people is probably a great example, right? You watch a tennis match or listen to a tennis match, you can hear ha, ha,
Yeah.
ha. Same thing with like karate, you know what I mean? Right? There's these, but is there a better way to do it? And so he had some interesting ideas on different kind of breath modalities where that kind of maximize you for action. Or he has these other things called box breaths, which is kind of like, it sounds like what Hickson is talking about, where the inhale and the exhale are the same, although it's probably not what Hickson is like, because the other foundations of the box breath are the holds. So it's like you breathe for 7 seconds, then hold for 7 seconds, then let out for 7 seconds, then hold that for 7 seconds, then breathe in. And so there's different things. And I think it's very underexplored breath work right now.
Yeah.
And people are very much figuring it out, but it's really interesting physiologically what happens. And then you have something like Wim Hof, which I know you've kind of tried that modality. I mean, when you get out of here, I'd love to try it with. Yeah, I'd love to try it with you a little bit more, because for me, when I do it, like there is like immediate physiological effects that I feel from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to sort of do it kind of hard, and you have to do it. There's a minimum threshold. Otherwise you don't, otherwise I don't get the effects.
All right.
So anyway,
you got to practice it. All right.
The breath work, the breath work is a very interesting component of the consciousness and physiological aspect that's really interesting to me. I don't know how we got on that tangent.
I don't know how we did either. Somehow, I could try to remember back, but I can't remember back.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting. I mean, I think it sounds like your viewpoint's definitely evolving, and I think it's an interesting.
Well, let me ask you about another one of the, the third chapter. I talk about the different benefits, and then I talk about the fact that, a lot of people say that this thing is already within you. In other words, it's not that you have to get to it. It's just that you have to awaken it within yourself, sort of idea. So that's one thing. And then I say, the regular form of meditation is not right. And so inherent in this, the title even, is basically a criticism of the sort of dominant Western form of meditation, which is that you start out paying attention to something like your breath or something, and it's important what you start out paying attention to. It can be a mantra or whatever. And then when you find your mind has wandered, you go back, you move your mind back to the object, right?
Right.
And what I say at the end of that third section is, no, that's exactly wrong. That's not the way you should do it. And I do that based on, all these 2,500 hours of meditation I've done with all these different teachers who all basically said that there were different things you returned your attention to, but always you were dragging your attention away from, from whatever it had drifted to and putting it back, except for the one that doesn't talk about that is Padmasambhava. Well, I shouldn't say that. The teachers that I've had all did that. All the 7 things that I talk about, in section 1, the 7 techniques, right? All say don't do that, except for the last one, which is mine, because I did that when I did my thing at 14 years old. I was trying to drag my attention back, right, to full consciousness. But the other ones really don't. And people think, at this point in history, that what you're supposed to do, what the teachers are telling us, is that what you're supposed to do is just start meditating and just keep meditating. And if you say to the teacher, it's not working, they say, like with the alcohol, like with the AA, they say, just keep coming back, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. That's what they say. And this book is, in a sense, a kind of a revolt against that, a rebellion against that idea. And in a sense, that's kind of one of the main ideas. And it's right there in the title, right? It's right there in the title. And then, so the question is, what do you replace that with? That's sort of what I'm kind of wrestling with now. I have a little bit about that at the end of that third section, but the most I do is I say, here's another method, sit down, pay attention to something, anything. And then when you find yourself paying attention to something else, pay attention to that, right? In other words, you're not dragging your mind back to some other state. You're paying attention to what arose, which is going to be one of these unfinished situations, or or it could be something that I didn't say this. I didn't have this straight in my mind, but if you're in flow, then you're not going to be. You're going to be paying attention to that, and you're not going to have any consciousness. And the thing I'm sort of wondering about now is it possible to combine full consciousness with sensations, for example? I mean, is that possible to do?
What do you mean?
Well, if you have a sensation, let's say you're doing jujitsu, you don't have room in your mind for the consciousness of consciousness.
No, so flow and full consciousness, I don't think you can.
They're not compatible. They're not compatible.
No.
But suppose you have a situation which is, before flow, before you develop flow, when you're practicing something, so you're not in flow, right? Is full consciousness going to be useful to have at the same time, or can you even have it, or is it just an intermittent thing?
You mean while something else is going on, full consciousness?
Yeah, while you're doing something else, it does not involve flow.
Right, but what is the something else? I mean, like walking around. I mean,
walking would be an example. Walking, sewing, right? Reading.
Yeah, I mean, I think
reading's
you can answer that, right? Like you've done. I've been fully conscious when I'm walking.
Yeah, I think you can do it. I think you can.
You can do it as long as but it has to be something that is not taking up by saying fully conscious. Like you're saying, like, okay, I'm going to take all of whatever this is, you can call it computing power, you could call it my soul or whatever. I'm going to, my focus, I'm going to take all of it and I'm going to be here and realize that I am awake.
Right.
So by necessity, to be fully conscious, you have to not be using very much of your horsepower or your RAM or whatever analogy.
Right. Yeah, but I have a feeling, and I think you confirmed it, is that actually you can be fully conscious while you're walking and be paying attention to the walking as well.
Mhm.
And I'm not quite sure how to think about that, but it's certainly not in this book. It's certainly not there. But
Yeah.
then, okay, so there's that. Then I go on to chapter 4. Okay.
Well, so wait, hold on.
Yeah. Okay.
Hold on. So you said a lot there, but I think the big way that you capped it off was a question, right? Of like, so you're kind of bucking the trend of saying, well, no, the thing is not being fully conscious all the time. The thing is what's happening in between.
In your regular life, right?
That's what you want to focus on. I mean, you want to focus on all of it,
Yeah.
but you want to direct some actual attention, because right now within the current pedagogy, that's not covered.
Right.
And so the answer to that is some sort of a system. I mean, it could be whatever, right? Like you did address it, right? You gave an example. You said just, sit down and start, waking up. And when you notice that you're thinking of something else, attend to that. That's that's the simplest way you can do it, which I think is great for this book. Right. If you want to expound upon that further though, then what you're looking at is a system, which ironically, to go back to the example that you just made, you would find in a place like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Where you are, because as you kind of said, and I know that the idea is still evolving, the things that are running through your mind, a lot of it are unresolved situations, things that you've not kind of lived through and completed, so they're still taking up space in your consciousness.
Right.
And that's a lot of what people are dealing with in AA. Now, a lot of that is trauma, right? But they have a whole system that they've developed, and it's not really all the 12 steps. Although I guess they all kind of have a component, right?
Yeah.
But really, it's in their process for dealing with the moral inventory, which is steps 4 and 5. And that's a process that you go about of writing down, all of these different things that are still bothering you, basically. Like anything that's bothering you, write it down, and you write down the very specifics of it in a very similar way to what you do when you're untangling things, right? So you write down, what happened, who it was that you had this resentment against, or who it was that you had these feelings, what happened, how it made you feel, right? And what is your part in all of that, right? That accountability portion. Those are the 4 things that you write down. And you do it for everything that you feel any type of way about.
So the what, the who you did it to, the feelings that you had, and your moral and your part in it. Those are the 4 things.
Right. And it's who you did it to, or who did it to you. And the who doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could be, you could do the government, or anything, whatever it is. So, and you write that down, each one on a piece of paper. I had a folder the first time I did it that was about that thick. It was like 150 freaking pages or whatever in a binder. And then you sort of go through that process with another human being, which is a very crucial component. You have to bounce it off of another person, and their job is to call bullshit if you're doing something diluted that's not based in reality, because we have all this different, the reality as in and of itself is sort of a shaky thing, right? It all sort of passes through our perceptions differently. What I experience in a situation may be very different. And so it's a kind of a balance on like, hey dude, this is not right. Then once that's done, you then get an action list of, okay, these are the amends that I need to make. They call it the amends, but really it's unfinished business. It's a plan of attack of like, okay, this is how I'm going to work through the different things that are still, going on with these various items. And then you go do that. And, but before that happens, before the amends process happens, you have to come up with a list of what they call your character defects. which are the underlying things in your personality, right? That cause these things, right? I'm selfish. I'm scared of this, that, and the third. I'm emotionally a baby, and so I don't know how to respond to things when I'm afraid with anything other than anger, because I don't have the emotional training to figure that out, or whatever it is. You have to come up with a list, and then from that you then get your amends list of how to kind of counteract that. You come up with the list of the defects, and then you come up with the opposite of them. So anyway,
so
there's a little bit more there, but that is a very flushed out system, right, for dealing with these things, that has been battle tested with hundreds of thousands of people. It's got a proven, track record of working in some percentage of really fucked up people. And so that's kind of what you're looking at when you get to the other end, right? What you put in this book is like kind of the simplest, most self-sufficient, if somebody's fairly well together, they can kind of maybe take this approach. And that's kind of the other, what I call the other end of the system of working through things like that.
If they're really fucked up, if they have an addiction in particular, which is what you're talking about, basically, this, what I'm talking about, will work. It's useless.
Well, so what you're talking about in the book, the little simple example won't work. But if you're interested in flushing out, like if your question is like, okay, I put this really simple thing here, and what could I do next for somebody that might need more? Because don't forget, that's a whole scale. There's a whole middle. And most people are not going to be able to do this shit. I mean, they might be able to do it with a couple of things, but like they're going to get demotivated. They're going to run into roadblocks, that are unforeseen, and they're going to have problems with it. They're going to stumble. That's how people are. You know what I mean? Working on yourself is hard. And it, by the way, like if you discovered this with, when you were 14, I mean, this has been your entire life journey, which, by the way, thanks for not ever sharing this with me when I was 14.
I didn't tell anybody until
Yeah. Well, you had stuff going on. You were working and stuff.
I was working on it.
Yeah. But so if you're interested in flushing it out, right, you could start going down that path of systemization with your own system that you fucking make up, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of, I guess, what I was saying in response to your question of, well, what do you tell them to do next?
Right.
You systematize it, and you flush out kind of more of what they can do to kind of assist them through this process of working on all this shit. That's what you do.
Well, I'm interested that you're taking this angle, because what I had in mind when I said, what do I tell them to do next, had to do with section 4, in which I have this list of all these different things. Now, I don't know if you got to that yet.
I read all of the sections, not all of the appendices, but all of the sections.
Well, section 4 basically says, what should I do next? And it starts out with a quotation of Buddha saying, this is all very well, but now, this is not for holding on to, this is for moving on from, right? Did you get to section 4? Can you find it?
Yeah, but it was 2 months ago, bro.
What did it say at the beginning? What does it say at the beginning of section 4?
Quiz, go wherever you want, having used what I teach you for the purpose of crossing over, not for the purpose of holding on to.
Yeah, basically. So that's saying what to do next after you have mastered, if that's the word, these 7 techniques, that will get you to full consciousness. Then what? And basically what I say is there are other things in my life, that are important besides this kind of waking up thing. And then I have a list of them under direction. So one of them is flow experiences. One of them is growing up, which I don't talk much about, but that has to do with sort of adult development kind of thing. But I don't talk about it much, but I do talk a great deal about flow. And, it seems to me flow is a very important part of life. And then there's things having to do, I think the next things have to do with relationships and I'm not even remembering, for Christ's sake. Physical values, physical values like physically fit and so on, and family values and close friends. Those are the other things. So those are basically physical values and relationships, in addition to flow and growing up and waking up and growing up. That was my attempt to get across the idea that although there are people who do this sort of consciousness thing, on a full-time basis, they're basically monks, and there's not very many of them. And that is not a suitable way to look at things from the point of view of 21st century world, right? That's not going to happen, right? That's not the way to do it. What you have to do is go on from there and take up other parts of your life. And one idea, and I'm not sure this is even true, is that the consciousness thing may help you with the other things. In other words, intermittently going into this conscious state may be a part, and I didn't even say this, of effectively dealing with flow, for example, effectively dealing with your physical life, which would include dieting, for Christ's sake, and also family values, social values, family values, close friends, and so on.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you think that it's the actual going into the conscious state, or do you think it's the noticing when you've fallen out on it and addressing whatever it is that's there that assists with that?
Well, I think I'm not sure what you mean, but let me ask this: what happens is you get into the conscious state, right? Conscious, and then at a later point, you suddenly wake up and realize you've dropped out of it, and you can remember back the last few seconds of what you were in. Okay, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm saying, which part do you think? Do you think it's the going into the conscious state, or do you think that it's the dealing with whatever, like the remembering the last few seconds and being like, oh, I'm thinking about this, and then dealing with it?
Yeah. So I would say, I think it's a good question. I mean, certainly the second thing you mentioned, noticing the last few seconds and then going in to deal with it, if it's a certain kind of thing, like if it's an unfinished situation that's really unfinished and that you need to deal with, you don't want to get rid of it, right? But if it's an unfinished situation, like, which is a conversation you're having in your mind, about something that happened a long time ago that you can't do anything about, that's a kind of unfinished situation that it would be worthwhile getting rid of, right? So there's those two kinds, those unfinished situations that are mostly going to be in the future. I mean, they're going to be in the context of things you're going to do. Whereas dealing with past unfinished situations, which I do a lot of and still do, brooding over things that happened to me, things that people said to me, and so on, those just seem to come into my mind without, unbidden, and they're not, it's not valuable to think about them. I mean, it might be in a sense of, lessons learned kind of thing, but mostly they're not that. Mostly they're just kind of
valuable to get rid of them.
Yeah, it would be worthwhile to untangle those and be free of them in some way, which is what that second chapter is about. But talking about the directions that you are to go in, which is what the fourth section 4 is about. The directions that you want to, that are worthwhile to go in. I said, here's an example from my life. So it's pretty autobiographical, I think, in a sense that those are things that I identified at a certain point as being the list of things, that I really wanted to go in, and that I sort of am devoting my attention to. In my case, for example, flow includes this writing thing that I do. The dictating for me and the thinking that is underlies the dictating is a kind of a flow experience for me. It's like snowboarding. It's very much like snowboarding. So anyway, why am I saying this? I guess it's sort of off the main line of the book in a way. I mean, it's about after you get enlightened in this way that I'm talking about, which are these brief momentary things, after which you go back to something else like flow or the sensations or something that doesn't involve that. Then there's this intermittency of going back and forth. I think maybe I should have said, or I didn't really include the fact that my idea is that having the enlightenment, having the ability to turn on your consciousness quickly and easily, you can get into the habit of doing that intermittently, and it should help. I didn't really put that in there, but anyway, that's sort of what I had in mind, or who I have in mind now doing next, maybe, or something like that. I don't know. So in a way, the fourth section.
Is it all getting into the consciousness, the enlightenment portion, or is it the dealing with the stuff that's the enlightenment portion?
No, I was definitely saying that getting into the full consciousness is the enlightenment portion. That's the light. That's when the light goes on. But you got the idea that the enlightenment part was really dealing with the shit. The second section, not being carried away by the hostile army of your own thoughts was the enlightenment part. That's sort of what you.
Well, I mean, to me, that's the argument that you're making in the book, right? Like the getting into the consciousness quickly. I mean, that's, I mean, it sounds like there are a bunch of different teachers, right? And they all have their own stance on how to do it. And some of them you can get into the consciousness quicker than others, but they all seem to be pretty quick in the ones that you shared, right? And that's what everybody thinks is enlightenment right now. Like if you went out and polled 100 people, I'm sure some high percentage would tell you that enlightenment is being able to be in that fully awake state, but they would all probably tell you for like long periods of time. That's kind of the general consensus that helps. But that's not what you're arguing.
No, it isn't.
In the book, you're arguing that it's the second portion, right? That's covered kind of in section 2, and I'd say in section 3, and then now also in section 4. That's the enlightenment.
Well, that's not what I think. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. There is a focus on dealing with the shit that comes into your mind unbidden.
Yeah. So if it's not enlightenment, what do you call it?
Yeah. Well, I think
a major part of your book.
Yeah. I call it an obstacle. I mean, at some point I say, this is the second section is about dealing with obstacles to being in the enlightened state as much as you want, right? Because what happens is you if you go to the enlightened state with one of these 7 things in section 1, then what always happens eventually is that you end up in waking up from one of these daydreams, or whatever you want to call them, one of these unbidden thoughts. You end up waking up from it and realizing that you haven't been in the conscious state, that you've dropped out of the conscious state. And how does that happen? Now, I do have a kind of So those are the 2 things. And in the book, there's, I guess I'm sort of attempting to say that the intermittency of that is part of the deal. In other words, it's not that when you drop into these hostile thoughts and all that, that's a failure. It's not a failure. What it is a part of the nature of things. And my explanation for that, which is not in the book, but which I've sort of got now, is that basically it's an evolutionary, story, that ancestors of ours who got into the conscious state and then just remained in it did not become our ancestors because they were eaten by the lion. So the natural thing to do, the evolutionarily based thing to do, is to go back and forth between the consciousness, full consciousness, and the other, and then and paying attention to things. But then the question arises in my mind: why ever go to the full consciousness thing at all? What good does that do evolutionarily? And I'm not sure I have an answer to that at all. I'm not sure I do.
Oh, so I can answer that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the answer is so that you can get to the part where you notice the other things happening, right? Without the going to the fully conscious, you never, if a train is going at 180 miles an hour or whatever, it's a runaway train, it's not in your conscious control.
Yeah.
Right? It's not something that if you don't ever stop for a second, you don't even know how fast it's going, right? It's like when you're in something that's going fast, you can be going 200 miles an hour and it doesn't look like 200 miles an hour, right? Because you're used to it. You're used to it, right?
So
when you're going down the freeway in a car,
or jujitsu, let's say, doing jujitsu, let's take that, or snowboarding or something. That's a thing, but you're talking about something that's controlled from outside you and not from inside you. Okay, so, all right. So let's say you're going down this street in a car, and you're not going to the consciousness. You're just being aware of you're not going to full consciousness. You're suggesting that going to full consciousness intermittently will give you a perspective on what you're doing.
So what I'm saying is, okay, if I stick with the car analogy, just maybe flesh it out. Let me try that. So if we're going along in the freeway at 80 miles an hour, right? Does it feel like you're going actually 80 miles an hour just in my car with the windows closed?
No,
it doesn't. Now, if we stop, right? And then we stop for 20 seconds on the side of the road, and then I floor it and get back up to that 80 miles an hour before you even notice it, before consciously and then you're like, whoa, we're going 80 miles an hour. Is that going to feel fast if something like that happens?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you now have the perspective.
I see.
Of stop versus going fast. And so if we now take that switch and move it into the mental realm, our minds are going constantly, like mine, 150 miles an hour, right? And before I started meditating and becoming aware, I didn't really realize. I mean, I knew that my mind would like run away and like I couldn't stop it.
Right.
But I didn't really realize that there was an alternative. And so to me, it seems like the value of going into this conscious state, fully conscious state, awake state, is really in the coming awake and realizing that I've been bumped out of it.
Right.
And that something else is happening.
Right.
That's the value. And you can't have that perspective without coming fully aware.
Coming fully aware at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. What I don't get is the part where, like you said, everybody else seems to be saying that the thing is getting into that fully conscious state and holding it for as long as possible.
Right.
And that is what I don't see the value in. And that's a weird thing, because it's like when everybody else is doing something one way, you know what I mean? And you have something different, like you have to try and see their perspective and understand it.
Yeah, right.
And maybe you can, because you've researched this, I mean, what do they say is the reason why they want to hold you in that space?
Yeah. I think they think that the benefits of that, the one possibility is that the benefits of that state of full consciousness sort of accumulate and build up so that you could do it more and more. But I agree. They don't really take into account the fact that you always drop out of it. And I'm sure that that happens, even to monks who are trying to stay in it all the time. When I read these reports, you do get some reports of not reports, but sort of the impression that they can stay in it for long periods of time, but they're not credible to me. They're not credible reports. I can see that they're trying to stay in it all the time, but that they are failing, basically. And they're not admitting they're failing, basically. They're not admitting that the nature of the beast is that you are going to fail. They're saying, no, I happen to be failing now, but I can get it right if I just keep meditating. And my observation of what happened to me, which is of course just me, but other people as well, is that didn't happen, and they always give it up. Even Shinzen Young, it turns out, I don't know if I told you this, has gotten to this thing at Arizona State. It's in the book. I don't think it's in the book that I sent you, but it was a report he gave me. Has gotten himself taken on as running a lab at University of Arizona, and doing a thing called sonication enhanced mindfulness, which is where they take sound waves into your brain, in a particular place. And he says does everything that this 40 years of meditation I've been trying to do doesn't do. Okay, so he's admitting straight out, and this is on YouTube, straight out, that the whole 40 years of meditation didn't work. Okay, and I think that that's true of the people that I've met. Now, there may be, people at some Zen monastery or something. I don't know. I have a limited knowledge. But if you look at, what they do, I mean, this Zen at War, for example, about all the Zen, masters in Japan who supported Japan in the Second World War. Well, or the different kind of Buddhist monks, in Burma, and, the things they're doing, and then the things they do with women, where they start, showing them their dicks and all that, and having affairs with women and pretending that they're not, or in other words,
well, that's anybody that suppresses their sexual,
yeah, right,
manifests in all kinds of crazy.
Well, and pretending that they're not is the problem. So pretending that they're not is the problem, and being caught, and being caught. Yeah. So it doesn't look to me like the Enlightenment actually causes a personality change at all. I think people are kind of expecting that it's going to. But the approach I'm taking, you're kind of right. I think you're right, actually, is that really the title and the subtitle are all about section 1. They're not about section 2 at all. They're all about section 1, which it seems to me is kind of but then I do say, I have to admit, and a lot of these books do not admit, that there's this other part which comes in after you have this experience of the Enlightenment, the lights going on. Then what happens is you wake up from the lights being off. And then you remember back what it was, and somehow that is important too. Kind of is an important. I mean, that's the other important part of life, really. And those two things are sort of woven together in some way. I think I sort of got that across in the book. Don't you think? Those two things are sort of woven together. Yep,
I think you did. I do have to go though, Pop.
Okay.
I love you.
Okay. Well, think about writing a review for Amazon after you get the book, right? And I will help you by, looking at this again, if I can bear it, and suggesting some themes that you could, but you could come up with it in your own head. So the way to do that is you write a review. The way you write a review.
I'll write my own damn review. You're going to interfere with my review? How dare you? What the fuck?
That's going to help you. That's going to help you.
I need your help.
Okay, I'm just going to tell you, here's how to do it. If you have something to say about the book, you turn on your dictation feature in your computer, and then you just say it. And then the quality of the dictation feature has gone up so much. I mean, they know what we're thinking, these guys.
Yeah, well, that's because they're recording all our conversations to put it in ads.
I know. But it works so well that, you know, I would never type it. But why am I telling you this? You know more than I do.
I have no idea why you think I'm gonna do this the way that you're telling me. It's crazy, but I love you dearly, and
Okay, I
it
love
was
you,
great
buddy.
chatting with you for the last little bit, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Okay,
All right.
let's do it again. Okay, bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.
Okay, now stop recording.